I didn't even change. The boots on my feet still carried the dust of cobble. My duffel bag was strapped across my shoulder, heavy with medals and folded fatigue. 14 months away. And not once had I missed a letter to my son. I wanted to surprise him. No parade. No announcement. Just a knock on his door and a long, overdue hug, but the driveway was empty. The porch light was off. His car was gone. The lawn hadn't been cut in weeks. I stood there, blinking at the house like I'd forgotten the address. I knocked once. No answer. Again. Still nothing. The mailbox was stuffed with flyers. Bills curled at the corners. One of them stamped in red "Final Notice." I turned when I heard the gate creak. Mrs. Langley, his neighbor, squinted from behind her screen door. "Marlene. Oh dear. You just getting in?" I nodded. "Just now. Thought I'd surprise Brandon." Her face shifted. "Sweetheart, Brandon's not home. He's been in the hospital. ICU. I think. For days now." I stood there. Not a muscle moved. She added, voice softer now. "I'm sorry. I thought you knew. I didn't. No calls? No messages? Nothing? And his wife I managed?" Mrs. Langley's lips thinned. "Oh. She's off on some yacht thing. Catalina. I think. Posted something about it on her social media this morning. Champagne and sunsets." I didn't respond. I just turned, walked back to the car, and threw my bag in the back seat. I didn't start the engine right away. My hands were on the wheel, but my mind was somewhere between the last mission briefing and the sound of Mrs. Langley's voice. ICU. Days. She didn't even call me. I pulled out of the driveway, already heading toward the hospital. The hospital air hit like bleach and grief. I showed my military ID to the nurse at the front desk. She glanced at it, then at me. Dust still clinging to my sleeves. The name patch faded, but intact. She didn't ask questions, just nodded once and picked up the phone. Within minutes, I was being led down a long hallway. The sound of my boots muffled against linoleum. "He's in room 408, the nurse whispered, opening the door for me. "You're the first one to come today." My throat tightened. Brandon lay still, his body swallowed by the wires and blinking lights of machines. His skin looked too pale, like every ounce of warmth had been drained out and stored in plastic IV bags. A soft hiss came with every mechanical breath. Tubes trailed from his arms. His eyes were closed. I stepped closer and reached for his hair, messy, uncut, damp with sweat, and brushed it back from his forehead like I did when he was a boy. He didn't move. I sat down beside the bed. "I'm here now." "Brandon," I said softly, "I'm sorry it took this long. No one else had brought him flowers. No cards. No toothbrush. Just a hospital-issued gown and that god-awful hum of survival. I stayed the night. I sat as the monitors blinked their rhythms. I held his hand when the tremors started. I pressed the call button when his breathing hiccuped. The nurses came, adjusted, left. The machines took over. At 2:42, something shifted. His fingers twitched beneath mine. His lips parted. Just a crack. Mom. Barely audible. Like a memory. But I heard it. "I'm here," I whispered. Then the flatline screamed, and every alarm in the room joined in. Brandon survived the night. They got his rhythm back barely. He was unconscious again by morning, but stable. The doctor used that word like a victory, like it meant something more than temporary. I stayed until his breath evened out, until the machines stopped screaming. Then I drove straight back to the house. I hadn't slept. My bag was still in the trunk. I just needed to see something, anything that made sense. Inside, the house smelled wrong. Sour milk, trash, a layer of dust on the mantel, dirty dishes in the sink, unopened mail stacked high by the door, a shut-off notice. Someone had been living here and also hadn't, but Victoria was nowhere to be found. No note, no clothes in the laundry, No messages on the answering machine, which still blinked red with 6 unheard recordings. I didn't press play. Instead, I sat at the kitchen counter, pulled out my phone, and typed her name into the search bar. There she was. Bikini, champagne. That yacht wasn't just a rumor, it was real. Her legs crossed on white cushions, sunglasses perched on her head, a bottle of rosé held up like a trophy. 5 women around her, all laughing like there wasn't a man in a hospital bed fighting for air. I looked at the timestamp. It was posted at 2:43 a.m., 1 minute after my son flatlined. The caption read, "Life is short. Party harder." I didn't cry. I took screenshots. All of them. I walked upstairs and opened the top drawer in what used to be Brandon's office, where the important papers used to be, where the house deed once had both our names, but the new copy filed neatly, notarized had hers alone. My name was gone, quietly removed. I placed the deed on the table beside the phone and stared at it until the lines blurred. Then I picked it up, folded it once, and slid it into my coat pocket. He opened his eyes 2 days later. The nurse had just changed his IV when I saw the flutter of his lashes. A flicker, then stillness, then again. I stood up slowly, heart thudding harder than any battlefield had ever managed to make it beat. His lips parted, dry, pale. "You're home," he whispered. I smiled, though something in my throat ached. "Yeah, baby, I'm here." He squeezed my fingers weakly, like the gesture cost more than he had. I brought a paper cup of water to his lips and let him sip. Then I sat back down, brushing his hair with the edge of my hand. We didn't speak much for the first hour. He drifted in and out. But when his eyes stayed open a little longer, I tried. "Does Victoria know you're here?" His face turned slightly away. I waited. "She knows," he finally said. "I didn't want to tell you. I didn't want it to be like this. Like what? Hard, heavy. You've already given too much." I didn't push him. That night, I stayed in the corner chair again. Lights dimmed. Brandon slept, breath steady for once. A nurse came in around midnight to check vitals. She looked at me and paused. "I thought you should know," she said softly, adjusting the monitor. His wife never came. Not once. Not for the surgery. Not when he was transferred. He's been alone since the day he was admitted. I didn't answer. I just kept my eyes on the rhythm of his chest rising and falling. Alone, while I was halfway across the world. Alone, while she drank champagne. I looked at him, my son, and saw the truth settle in. It hadn't just been distance, or pride, or time. Someone had built a wall between us, and I was starting to believe she did it on purpose. I waited until Brandon was asleep, then left the hospital quietly, letting the nurse know I'd be back before sunrise. I didn't go home. Not yet. Instead, I drove across town to a storage facility I hadn't visited in years. The code still worked. Unit 217. Back corner. Dusty light bulbs humming overhead. The air smelled like cardboard and time. Inside, I found the Foot Locker military issue. Metal clasps, worn corners. I dragged it forward, knelt, and opened it. Everything was still in place. My discharge papers, commendation plaques, the small, folded flag from my husband's casket, and beneath them, a black hard-shell briefcase with a fingerprint lock. I pressed my thumb against the reader, heard the soft click. The lid opened with a sigh. Inside the original power of attorney I'd signed years ago before my first tour in Afghanistan. Brandon's name on one copy, Victoria's scribbled onto a second version, added after the wedding. Under my suggestion, I hadn't thought much of it at the time. It felt practical. Fair. Now it felt like a setup. Bank statements, authorization transfers, pages of financials I barely remembered signing. Some of them recent, too recent. Near the bottom, I found a sealed envelope. The handwriting on it was Brandon's. It read, "If something happens to me, and Mom comes back." I opened it. A short letter. rambling, full of regret, full of guilt, a confession. Really, he knew Victoria had been controlling the money. He didn't know how to stop it. He didn't want to lose her, but he didn't know who he was anymore. I folded the letter, slid it into a fresh navy folder, along with the screenshots of her Instagram post, a copy of the altered deed, and the forged financial documents. Then I clicked the folder shut, stood, and carried it to the car. The sky was turning blue again when I pulled into my driveway, folder still in my lap. Tomorrow, it would go to the lawyer. Tonight, it would sleep beside me. I was in the kitchen when the phone rang. Not my phone, Brandon's. I'd brought it home from the hospital, just in case. It had barely buzzed in days. But now, mid-afternoon, it lit up with her name, Victoria. I let it ring once, twice. Then I picked up, "Hello? Victoria," I said, keeping my voice level. "I see you made it back. Did you enjoy your trip?" A pause. "Then where's Brandon recovering?" I replied, "He almost died. I thought you'd know." "What do you mean, why didn't anyone call me? I'm his wife. Interesting," I said calmly. "Because none of the nurses even knew he had one." The silence on her end cracked with tension. Then it snapped. "You had no right to touch anything. This is my house. Those are my accounts." "No," I said, my voice colder now. "They were our accounts. You just forgot whose name signed them first. You don't get to freeze my cards. You don't get to—" I had every right. "And now," I said, glancing at the navy folder sitting open beside my coffee mug, "the courts will too." She started yelling, her voice high, furious, unraveling. I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. I waited for the moment where noise replaces thought, and when she paused to breathe, I spoke one final word, "Lawyer." Then I ended the call. I watched the phone screen return to black. I stood up, grabbed the folder, and slid it into my bag. The locks had already been changed. The financial hold was in motion. Tomorrow, the lawyer would have everything. This wasn't about revenge. This was about restoration of trust, of truth, of control. I walked to the door and turned the deadbolt. I wore the uniform because it reminded me who I was, not just to them, but to myself. The courtroom was quiet when I walked in. I carried the navy folder in one hand, my posture straight, the heels of my boots echoing on the tile. I nodded to my attorney and sat at the front without speaking. Victoria arrived 10 minutes late. Her heels clacked faster than mine ever had. Her hair was a mess of curls thrown into a clip. Her lipstick smudged. She looked like someone who hadn't slept, and not from worry, from panic. She didn't look at me, just kept whispering to her lawyer, flipping through documents like they might magically reorder themselves. The judge entered. Everyone stood. He was calm, older, with a face that didn't blink at emotion. He took the file my lawyer handed him, the one I'd filled with everything highlighted withdrawals, photos of the forged deed, screenshots of the yacht party, Brandon's voice memo, recorded from the hospital bed, and the letter sealed, signed, dated. The judge read in silence. When asked, I spoke clearly. Only facts. No commentary. Victoria, on the other hand, couldn't sit still. She interrupted, blamed the bank, claimed the signature wasn't hers, insisted Brandon had told her to party, that he didn't want her to suffer. The judge didn't flinch. At the end of the hearing, he read his decision like a closing ceremony. I am granting Marlene Rourke full medical guardianship over Brandon Rourke's care. Effective immediately. Victoria's mouth opened, but he kept going. I am also transferring financial control of the shared estate to Mrs. Rourke, pending further review. Her voice rose. You can't do this. She manipulated him. He was sick. And finally, the judge said, setting the folder down, I'm ordering an immediate financial investigation into Victoria Rourke's use of joint assets over the past 18 months. That was when she lost control. Security was already standing. She screamed as they let her out. My name. His name. Accusations. Cries for fairness. I sat still as the courtroom cleared, the echo of her voice fading behind the closing doors. Brandon looked better. His skin had more color, his eyes clearer. The machines around him were quieter now, still present, but no longer screaming. When I walked into the room, he smiled for real this time. Not the ghost of one, but something that felt rooted. I sat beside him and placed his hand in mine. He squeezed it, gently, and looked down at the small envelope in his lap. I was going to leave this with the nurse, he said. In case I didn't, you know. He handed it to me. My name was written across the front in his handwriting, shaky, but still his. I wrote this when I first started feeling the symptoms. He said, I was afraid I wouldn't make it. I opened it slowly. The letter was short, but it landed like a grenade. Mom, if you're reading this, I guess you came back. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. About the pain. About how bad things got. I thought if I ignored it, it would go away. I thought I could handle it on my own. I wanted to be strong. Maybe that sounds stupid after everything you've survived, but I didn't want to be a burden. I didn't see how she was cutting me off from you until it was too late. You've always fought for me, even when I didn't know it. I hope you're still fighting. I hope you know I never stopped loving you. B. I folded the letter back into its envelope and held it in my hands. I didn't say anything. Neither did he. We just sat there. And for the first time since I'd returned, I let myself cry. Not the silent tears I'd trained myself to hold back. Not the brief flicker of emotion quickly swallowed. Real tears. The kind that come when something inside you cracks. Not from weakness, but from finally being seen again. Brandon rested his head against the pillow and whispered, I'm glad you're here. I reached for the cup of water and helped him drink. The locks were changed before we pulled into the driveway. I'd had the place cleaned while Brandon was still in the hospital. Everything Victoria left behind had been boxed and stored in the garage, labeled for collection if she ever dared come back for it. The house smelled different now. Clean. Lived in. Ours. Brandon walked slowly, his steps measured and cautious. A cane in one hand, my arm in the other. I guided him through the front door and down the hallway to the room I'd spent the last 3 days preparing. A small shelf held the books he used to love. A soft chair by the window. A clock that didn't tick too loud. And on the nightstand, his favorite mug filled with decaf and a splash of cream. Just how he used to take it before the surgeries. He didn't say much, just sat on the edge of the bed and looked around. I watched his eyes land on the mirror. There, taped to the glass, was a photo I'd slipped in that morning. It was us, Brandon at 5 years old, sitting on my lap in the park, dirt on his knees, his face covered in ice cream. I was in uniform even then, my arm wrapped around him. Both of us laughing like nothing in the world could touch us. He reached up and touched the edge of the photo. I forgot this even existed, he whispered. I didn't speak. I just set the coffee down beside him and sat in the chair. That night, we ate chicken and rice in the living room. We didn't turn on the TV, just sat, talking softly, letting time rebuild what silence had splintered. Before bed, he paused at his doorway and looked back at me. Thank you, he said, for coming home. I nodded, too full to speak. The next morning, I opened the Navy folder one last time. I stood in front of the safe. The Navy folder in my hands. The pages inside were still neatly arranged documents. Letters, evidence, all of it. It had served its purpose. It had spoken when I didn't have to. Now, it could rest. I placed it gently back into the safe, turned the dial, and heard the quiet click of closure. Then I walked to the desk and pulled out a clean sheet of paper. No lines, no stamp, just white, open space. I stared at it for a moment, letting the stillness settle around me. Then I picked up my pen and wrote across the top, "What I owe myself now." The first word came easy, peace. Then time, a porch swing, coffee without waiting for an alarm, a future that's finally my own. The words sat there, small and steady, no drama, no noise, just truth. I folded the paper once and slipped it into a drawer, not locked, not hidden, just waiting. Through the kitchen window, I saw Brandon in the garden. He was watering the succulents I'd nearly let die while he was gone. His back was still hunched, movement slower than it used to be, but his hands were steady. There was color in his face now, sweat at his temples, life. I stood at the doorway, coffee in hand, watching him turn toward the sun. He caught me looking and gave a small wave. I raised my mug in return. I didn't need to say anything. Not anymore. For the first time in a long while, the house didn't feel like something I had to guard. It felt like somewhere I could breathe, like something that could grow again. Not because the war was over, but because I had finally walked off the battlefield and left the armor behind.